Hi, how you doing? So last Friday, we talked about, well, rather, we listed all the reasons why we don't achieve our goals, and within one of them, and a big thing is making decisions in terms of we sit on the fence, and I'm totally, or I have been guilty of that in the past. Is we sit on the fence, we have almost like a kind of paralysis going on. We just don't know whether to say yes or no to something. We don't know what to do. And I think a large part of that is not being clear on what we want. And then when we can get clear on what we want, is just everything just becomes so much easier to make a decision. Um, Equally, another thing that can stop us is not being honest about what we want. Not almost kind of being ashamed almost of what we want. And we have to let it go. If you truly want whatever it is, whether you want to be a millionaire, whether you want a relationship, whether you want a fantastic life, doesn't matter. Be honest about that first and foremost. And then think about what it would take for you to get that. So one of the things we talked about, so in our mastermind, a couple of weeks ago, we explored this idea of this making decisions and the inability, rather, to make decisions. And I think what we sort of came up with was this idea that when we're clear about what we want. So, for example, a few of us in the mastermind, we talked about climbing the career ladder, or for me, for example, it was becoming a professional accountant, and it was very clear. There was very clear, concise steps about what to do. I had to sit the exams, I had to get the relevant work experience, which then meant I had to move jobs if my employer couldn't give me all that, etc., etc. Someone else was in a similar situation. So when we have clear, concise steps, that makes our decisions so much easier about what we say yes to and what we say no to. When we have something what I would deem a little bit fluffy, perhaps, on the face of it, when we want to be happy, for example, we want £1,000,000, or we just want to be joyful, or whatever, we then have to make those, we have to be able to measure it, we have to be able to quantify it. So, we have to kind of think about, we almost like need a checklist of when we get asked a question: do you want to go to this, or do you want to go to that? Do you want to do this? Do you want to do this? Do that? We have to be able to look at our checklist mentally, or imagine it, and think, right, does this give us what we want? So to do that, to make it quantifiable, to make it measurable, we then have to think about, okay, how do we quantify something that might be considered fluffy in the first instance? So I'd recommend you, first of all, bring up what you want. Let's just take the example, be happy. Okay? So then we have to think, okay, what is it that we feel when we're happy? That's probably an obvious one, but nonetheless, maybe get a little bit explorative about what it is that you feel. Do you feel at peace? Do you feel giddy with excitement? Do you, all that sort of stuff. Think about what you see, what you hear, what you taste, what you smell. Bring all your senses to that thing that you want. Believe that imagine you already have it. And the thing is, you've probably already got a sense of it already. But even if you don't, imagine everything that you would feel, everything that you would feel, everything you would see, everything you would hear, everything you would taste, and everything you would smell. Now, you might not be able to have answers to all of those, but kind of pick 2 or 3 of them at least, okay? So, for example, for me, it was I was able to kind of bring up what I felt, I was able to bring up what I see, and I was able to bring up what I hear. So with those, then, it's about really getting to know those senses, and then trying to quantify them. So, for example, one thing I would, and I kind of did this from a kind of roundabout way kind of thing. So, like, I was looking for peace. So I just chose peace. Okay. So then I thought, sometimes I don't feel that. And I was able to kind of identify what I felt when I don't feel peace, which was, that might work for you. So when I don't feel peace, I'm overwhelmed, I'm rushing around, I'm frantic, all that sort of stuff. So then I was like, okay, so the opposite of that would be when I'm not frantic, not overwhelmed. And then I got to think, okay, what is it that maybe gets me overwhelmed, or what is it that makes me all frantic and running about mad like a headless chicken? And then I explored that. And then I went down a route. Okay, I thought, okay, that's interesting. So it's about being curious about what leads to the feeling that you want to have with the goal, or rather thinking, what is it that you don't want, being aware of that feeling, and then considering what brings about that feeling. And then once you've got to that point, you can then take that statement and make it quantifiable. You can then, so for example, sometimes I can be overwhelmed because I don't like saying no, because I like being helpful, for example. But sometimes being too helpful, sometimes it can, sometimes I've got the time and the space and I like to help and I can be helpful and do all sorts of things for other people. Equally, sometimes I might say yes to something because I want to be helpful, but I really don't have the time for it. So it's then thinking, okay, I have to think about when, what's going on in that moment that I'm saying yes when I really ought to be saying no. So getting explorative about that, being mindful about that. And for me, it was, sometimes I'm worried about what they'll think of me if I say no, So then it's going deeper with that statement and going, well, what else is going on with that? So yeah, I just really recommend that you pull up together what it is you want, what you imagine that you will feel, see, hear, taste, and smell, and then with those, come up with something quantifiable that will allow you to determine when you're making a decision whether this is something that's going to take you to your goal or take you away from your goal. Okay. Now, we did this a couple of weeks ago. So, mastermind, it was about 2.5 weeks ago. We had the mastermind and we talked about all this sort of stuff. And honest, like, the amount of decisions that I've made in the last 2.5 weeks, some of them have been quite life changing. And it's just all because of this checklist, all because I was able to identify what I wanted, put it into quantifiable steps, quantifiable measurements. And it just made the decision process so much easier. Now, that's not to say I didn't doubt myself sometimes. I think we do, that's natural. But we have to be mindful of that and step over it or let it go. Just don't let fear get in the way. If you really want what you want, then go for it. Start being honest about it. You don't have to shout it from the rooftops if you don't want to. That's perfectly normal. But just start making decisions that take you closer to that. Okay? Good luck. Bye-bye.